What's up guys, my name is Andy. In this video, I'm going to be upgrading my intake manifold from the Edelbrock Performer 289, which is a great manifold for a relatively stock 289 or 302 motor, but because I have that 347 stroker, I can move a lot more air and I need a manifold that I can take advantage of that. So I'm going to be putting in an Edelbrock RPM air gap. I'll go through it in a few minutes and to show you the differences between the two manifolds, but let's go ahead and jump right in and I'll show you all the steps we need to do to get this manifold out of the car. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to drain the coolant from the radiator, and we don't need to drain all of it. We need to drain just enough to get the coolant below the manifold level. So maybe a gallon or so out of this thing. You don't need to drain the whole thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and take off the Monte Carlo bar because it will make it easier to get into the manifold if we've got that Monte Carlo bar out of the way. Now we'll go ahead and remove the air cleaner and then unplug all the various electrical components. And to make this easier, we're going to go ahead and unplug the distributor cap and actually pull the distributor out. It's just a lot easier to pull the manifold off the car when the distributor's not in the way. I do want to point out though, the easiest thing you can do is set it to top dead center of number 1, and that way you know that your pointer will align with the correct spark plug, and also double check on your harmonic balancer, and that way it'll tell you if you're on TDC for cylinder number 1. Now we can go ahead and take the screw out that locks down the distributor. And again, the reason why we put it on number 1 TDC is when we go to put this back in, I know that I can align this up with this mark here on the distributor that I already made, and that way I can just put it right back where it goes. I don't have to worry about my timing being off. It's already set and ready to go. I can just drop it back in when we're ready to put everything back together. Now I'm going to disconnect the fuel line, and you're going to want to put some towels underneath here when you take this fitting off because you might leak a little bit of fuel. There might be some residual fuel in the line there, so let's go ahead and get that off of there. Next, we're going to want to take the throttle linkage off. Don't forget about the return springs on there, and then you can go ahead and unbolt the carb and get it out of there. Now we can disconnect the heater line from the manifold, and we'll go ahead and do the one from the water pump too while we're here. Now we want to disconnect these last 2 radiator hoses before we take the manifold off. All right, the last step is to take the intake manifold off and go ahead and take all the bolts out. You might have to pry on it a little bit to break the seal from the front and the back. And then also you're going to probably have some coolant in the manifold. You might spill that everywhere, so just be careful with that when you're pulling this out of there. All right guys, that was not smart on my part. I should have stuck a towel down inside the distributor hole here, just because you don't want coolant, because that goes right straight down to the oil. We can wipe the coolant out of the valley here, and so it won't mix with the oil, but I really did not want coolant to go down there, and that's a mistake I shouldn't have done. So anyways, so now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and clean off the heads, clean off these rails right here, get all this silicone off, and we're gonna get it prepped for when we put the new manifold on. All right, that's about as far as I want to take it. You guys can decide what, clean is for you. I think this is a pretty good job, and we can go ahead and just leave everything how it is. In fact, This is probably the best way to do this because as you're taking care of everything else, you don't want to get dust and things to fall inside the runners and stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and leave this. Let's go take a look at the manifolds. All right, guys, so here is the Edelbrock Performer 289 side by side with the RPM air gap. And the first thing you probably notice is how much taller this is. This deck is a roughly 1 inch, I don't know, maybe 2 inches taller. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle. But so that's something you guys got to think about for hood clearance. Depending on how tall your air cleaner is and your carburetor and stuff, you may run into issues with that. So that's something you're going to want to explore. I'm going to cross that bridge when I get there because I got a couple things I can do, I think, to take care of that. But in the meantime, I still want this manifold, so that's good. Now I need to go through and I need to take everything off of here. I need these studs for my carburetor. I'm going to need my temperature sensor. I'm going to need this bypass hose for the heater. And then, you know, the electric sensor for the sensor for my electric fans. And then obviously this water neck here, we're gonna transfer all that stuff over to the new manifold. And don't forget, you're gonna need a new gasket for this water neck up here, the thermostat housing. This is what I've been using. These Felpro gaskets are pretty good. And in my last video where I installed the manifold, I showed you the super secret trick of getting these to hold the thermostat in place while you fasten this to the intake manifold by just using some 3M glue, 3M spray glue, and that will hold that thermostat in place so it doesn't slide down and get in between the thermostat housing and the intake manifold. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of everything, get it all switched over, and get everything ready so we can put this back on the car. All right, we got everything transferred from the old manifold to the new one, and this is ready to go. We can go ahead and get this installed in the car. But real quick before I do that, what's the reason? Why do I have this manifold? Why am I upgrading to this setup here? The Performer 289 is a great manifold for a relatively stock 289 or 302. This is a good upgrade over the stock manifold. However, because the motor I have now, that 347 stroker, I can move a lot more air, and so I want a manifold that's designed to allow me to do that. The RPM air gap here, it's got a little bit larger runners, a little bit straighter path. This is going to be something that's going to impede less of the air than this one would, and this manifold would. So this is something that I want to upgrade to. Also, the air gap, why they call it that is because there is a gap underneath here, and what it does is it's going to separate, you know, this where you mount the carburetor from this bottom section. Like on the old one here, it's all one piece. So this can get heat soaked, and that affects the carburetor, makes the air hotter, less power. So with this setup here, because I can have air blowing through there as you're driving the car, it'll help keep this thing cooled down, and because it's separated, it's only connected by these runners, you're gonna get less of a heat soak up here near the carb from the hot motor down below. So again, the two big reasons, this thing is going to allow me to flow more air than the Performer 289, and then this design allows me to keep this manifold a little cooler than that one. What kind of power gains am I going to see? I might see about a 5% power increase going from the 289, the Performer 289 to the air gap. Maybe. There's a lot of, you know, things that are going to play a role in that, but this is something that's going to take advantage of the air that I can move, and it's really only going to be seen above 3,500 RPMs, where I do want to do a little bit of hard driving, so I'm going to be looking forward to this extra power. So now that we're ready to go, let's go ahead and get this thing set up and put in the car and get the gaskets put on place. Now we want to go ahead and get all this cleaned up and get everything out of the way and get it prepped to put the manifold in here. The easiest way to do this is if you start pulling these out of the runners, and you got to be careful that you can pull them towards this center section, kind of catch any pieces that might have fell in the runners. You don't want that inside your motor. You don't want it in your coolant passages either. We just kind of pull these out. Oh, yep, there's a little bit in there. And I think it's also safe that if you go in here afterwards and get a vacuum cleaner, that might help too. We can do this one last. Before we put the gaskets in place that go in between the intake manifold and the heads, we need to put a bead of this ultra black gasket maker back there on the back of the block, and same thing right here. We want about a 1/4 inch bead that's going to go in here. I don't want to use those cork gaskets. We're just going to use this stuff. And then we need to make sure that we put plenty of this same gasket maker around the water jacket holes so that they don't leak. And then also it's a good idea to put a little bit on the bottom of each runner. And the reason why is that kind of seals it from any oil or anything getting up inside and getting into your into the ports there for your heads. So we'll go ahead and get those beads put up, and then we're gonna go and lather this up in the gasket maker and then put them in place. Also, I've got some studs that I had cut the heads off and just throw them into the heads there. I'll show you that, and that'll make it easy when we align the intake manifold up and put it down straight. You can see that we got to get both sides of this water jacket area, and we just kind of smear this around, make sure that it's fully covered on both sides, and then same thing with the bottom of the runner there for the intake. And just flip it over, make sure you get everything. We don't want this thing leaking in the valley. We definitely don't want this thing leaking anywhere else. So. Something that's pretty messy, and this gasket maker stuff gets everywhere. So just take your time, be patient, and you'll get it. On my particular heads, I don't have anything going through here, so I don't need to worry about that. Now these gaskets that I have here are not directional, so you can just go ahead and slap them on there. And there's a little tab down here from the head gaskets that this will rest on, and a little hook that will kind of hook onto it, so kind of hold everything in place. Again, same thing with the other one. Just go ahead and use that cheese whiz style. Works out pretty good. Oh, see, I'm already getting it all over this gasket. It's not going to hurt anything, but it's going to make for more cleanup. If I ever have to change anything, you want to minimize how much you get this gasket maker everywhere, because you're gonna get it everywhere. Again, make sure that you get that little hook piece that's on the bottom of these intake manifold gaskets to hook underneath the head gasket tab. That will hold everything in place, line it all up. All right, now everything's ready to go. We can go ahead and drop this in. And again, this is where these pins come in really helpful, because it allows you to just go ahead and drop this straight down on top of everything, and it'll be all lined up, and you don't have to worry about sliding things around and smearing things. All right, and then you just set her on down. And then from here, it's just a reverse of what you did to remove the manifold. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put all the bolts in and just get everything nice and snug, and then we'll come back and do the torque procedure for the manifold. Now that I got all the bolts in, I wanna go through the torque sequence that Edelbrock suggests. Now this is something that's included with the manifold when you get it, and it's got the number of what, if you do number 1, then number 2, number 3, and if you're looking at it, this way, right? This is the way it's supposed to be. And we want to follow that. Now on here, it's got a different firing order for the distributor. That doesn't matter for what we're doing here. Remember, I've got the 302 roller motor, so I have a different firing order, but that doesn't matter for this. So we're gonna go through and we're gonna torque them all down, and it says 18 to 20 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and do that in the order it's got here, and then we'll be done with that. All right, so everything's torqued down, that's good to go. And really it is just the reverse of what you did. We'll put these hoses back on, and we'll put the heater hoses back on, we'll put the carburetor on, we'll hook up the linkage, and the springs for that. Then we'll hook up the wires. And the last thing we'll do is we'll put the distributor in place, as I don't want to get anything down in that hole until the very end. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. All right, the last part we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and stab the distributor. And again, because we set up the #1 top dead center, it's gonna make it really easy to set this. Now, when you drop this in there, you may have to fill it around a little bit. You'll notice that if you put the pointer over one way, it'll kind of turn as it drops in place. So it's kind of a little bit of an art to get this. Sometimes it drops in on the first try, and sometimes it takes a little bit to get it to fit in the right spot. So you saw me struggle with that a little bit. It can be kind of a, you know, just you got to be right in the right spot for that thing to drop down. And again, I've got a mark here for #1. I just want that towards that. And as you rotate this, you want to get this to line up with the mark that I made. And then I know we're set up for #1, and then we're good to go. So we'll go ahead, put the screw back in here to hold this in place, put the cap back on, put all the wires back on, and then we're good with that. All right, so everything is installed and hooked up and back to normal, except for we've got the carburetor is really high, and really that stud is sticking up. Now that stud's not really a problem because when we close the hood, and if you guys can see in there, I don't know if you can see in there. Anyways, the stud is sticking up, but it's not touching the top of the scoop, which is good. However, I know that the top of my air cleaner, you know, goes quite a bit higher than what, you know, it almost goes to the top of that stud. So I know that my air cleaner is going to be too big for this setup here. You know, if we just go ahead and drop this on here, you know, that's good. That's where we want it, but yeah, it's sitting on the air cleaner. This part here of my hood scoop cutout is touching on here. So my options are a couple things. I can get a smaller air cleaner that will fit up inside there. I can get a shorter air cleaner. I think this is a 2-inch. I don't remember. Or I can take this ring off, and that will drop the air cleaner down. But I like having the clearance that this provides underneath the air cleaner around all this stuff, or I could take that phenolic spacer out. So I do have some options. I think one of the two, either this or that, and I can use my stock air cleaner and I'd be good to go. So I think we'll have to figure out what I'm gonna do there. So guys, that's it. That's how you upgrade, whether you've got a stock manifold or an aftermarket one, you wanna go to the air gap. I mean, really it's the same process no matter what manifold you have, but that gets that one installed. I didn't put the coolant in yet because I wanna let that ultimate gasket makers, I wanna let that stuff cure, and I don't want any water in there. I'm sure it's fine. I mean, I know car shops, you know, put all this stuff together, put the coolant back in, and then send the car down the road, and everybody's happy. So, but I'm not in a big hurry. It's snowing again here, and so I'm not gonna be able to get the car out. But that's okay, because I'm not in a big hurry, so I've got some time. And then so I'll let that stuff cure, then I'll put the coolant back in, and I'm good to go. I'll have to figure out what I wanna do about the spacer or whatever for the air cleaner. And then I can't quite take advantage of this manifold yet. I've still got some more miles I need to drive. You know, they say, well, my engine builder told me to put 500 miles on this thing, change the oil, and then I'm good to go. I don't know what the right amount is, maybe 100 miles, maybe 500, maybe 1,000. I'm sure every one of you guys has a different idea of what the correct mileage is, and that works for you. I'm just gonna go with what my engine builder said. So I'm gonna drain the oil out, I wanna get to that mileage, and then I can take this car out and really open it up and see how much better this manifold is. I mean, I guess, I don't know, I'm thinking of ways to, how can I get around this? How can I get some more miles in? But with the snow, there's just no way. Maybe I could do what it did in Ferris Bueller, right? Put the car up on blocks and let the tires spin and let the miles tick up. That's probably a bad idea. I probably better not do that. So I'll just do the miles the regular way. So anyways, all right guys, so I'm excited. That's it. That's the Edelbrock RPM air gap installed, and I'm excited to try it out. So guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out, and we'll see you in the next one.